Yeah.
So, Debbie, what does it look like in your experience to keep a long-term vision in mind for our recovery while still staying present in the daily routine of our healing journey? How do we do both of those?
Yeah, I always think back to the women, the partners who have been betrayed. Their journey probably is more difficult than any of them, because they're in the moment and they're in the pain of right now.
Oh, sure.
But getting them to attuning to that pain and understanding this is a crisis and your anger is warranted, then all these things. However, moving forward, when you're halfway through it, like after the disclosure process, getting them to focus then on what is it you're going to need to move forward. And that's usually they want him to change, or their hope is that he'll change, then I'll be okay. But that's not usually the case. And so I have to really help them go into what their, where do they find safety? And usually this betrayal trauma has exposed where they have placed their faith and trust in. Mm-hmm. And that was in their husband's fidelity and that belief. And that's not to say that he didn't owe that to her and she owed it to him, but the betrayal of that then compounded all that past trauma as well that's undealt with. So now she's living in this state of, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, he doesn't care about me, how can he say he loves me when he does this? And there's a lot of meaning and message taken from those behaviors that are part of her past. So it's leading them now into, what can we hope for the future? You know, if we had a better sense of self and a better security to know, okay, my safety and security doesn't need to rely on his behavior, because we can't control what he does. But I can control what I'm thinking and feeling, or where I place my trust. And I can trust that even if I am betrayed, that God's going to hold my soul intact. I'm going to be okay.
Yeah,
that's been my mantra too. In the beginning, it was such a shameful feeling to be betrayed, and it just elevated all that. So I said, God said, "I will hold your soul intact," and I felt like, oh gosh, He will, because it does feel like my soul's being ripped out when you're betrayed. So having them hold on to that for the future, saying, how can we get there? Is that what you want? And so a lot of the betrayed wives, once they finish some of the work that we've done, go into like untangling relationships, about codependency. I don't necessarily like that term, but it's a trauma bonding. And how can I then understand the dynamics of a tangled up relationship and learn to stand on my own? And
yeah, what I hear you saying there is like getting the person to define their preferred future.
Yeah.
And if we can have that with a mindset, like that's a great thing. But sometimes like whatever that preferred future is might feel like too lofty of a goal. And then just thinking through our material, I love the SMART goal ideas. Like, is it specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-based? I hope I'm correct. And if I said it, there it is. It's official now.
Yeah.
But when we set those goals, are we doing things that are specific, they are measurable, they are achievable, and all of those are important as we're moving towards? And I just think, like, what is one small goal that we can set to like achieve, to move towards that preferred future? And sometimes we just make it by setting small goals to getting us to that point.
Right, and how much of that, I'm sorry,
No.
how much of that is up to me? I don't need my husband, or I don't need my wife to do this or that for me to achieve this benchmark. There might come a time where, yes, I have a vision of us sitting on the front porch and, talking about our feelings and all those things. I said, well, that's a great vision, but what's it going to take for you and your heart to be open to that, and be able to sit with him and hold those kind of conversations when right now you tell me there's a wall up. So that's kind of how I have to shape, as a leader, maybe sometimes shaping their view of of what's coming down, the possibilities.
Yeah.
It's controlling what I can control, and being willing to trust God with the things I can't. And maybe that, back to that old quote, the wisdom to know the difference between the two of those.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I can control my own well-being. I can find my identity in Christ and not in someone else. But I can't control their behavior. I can't control their choices for recovery. And like you said, if I believe, though, that I can be okay, that's a vision of long-term recovery, that I can do things that support my growth, that help me move closer to God and others, and hopefully my spouse does that as well. But if not, I'm going to be okay. And that, I think, keeps us in a place of doing our work while still believing that we're headed towards a really good outcome eventually.
Right. It's really okay. So we have patterns in our brain. So don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. How do we renew the mind? And that is, we are in control of our thoughts, feelings, and emotions. That's part of our soul. So where do we connect those two? To God. And I turn a lot to, at least halfway through the counseling, to love is patient and kind. It is long suffering, but I know you have suffered for a long time in this marriage, and you've been very, very patient, and that's commendable. With the heartache that you've told me, but also it's kind. Well, what does that mean? How do I be kind? And love does not dishonor. So now we get into that realm of how to communicate, and how do I communicate my anger, frustration, my heartache to somebody that right now I'm really mad at? And how do I do that respectfully? So that's where the big B word comes in, is boundaries. And that's a facilitator too. Job is to have good boundaries with how they're dealing with their own life, but also boundaries dealing with what do I do in year 2? That's a big benchmark to work on, is boundaries and your attachment style. Those are the big 2 things that I think need to be looked at, because your attachment style will always be there, but you can manage it to make. If you have an insecure attachment, you can make it secure. You can have some secure relationships if you work hard.
Yeah.